After the examination, I sat in the hallway. My daughter was talking to the doctor, and like a trusting old woman, I believed she was caring for me. But an orderly came up and whispered, "I heard your daughter asking me to submit paperwork so you wouldn't have to go through treatment." She said, "She won't last long. Why waste the money?" I froze, my heart pounding. For the first time in many years, I wasn't afraid for my health. I was afraid for my daughter. They had given me a thin blanket and a chair with one leg shorter than the others. It clicked a little every time I shifted my weight. I could smell antiseptic and the faint sweetness of someone's spilled juice. A television in the waiting room down the corridor played a show with laughter that bounced against the hard floors and died on the gray paint. An elderly man 2 seats over was snoring softly. A nurse pushed past, her shoes whispering on the tiles. Another patient moaned once, then quieted. Everything around me felt ordinary and cruel at the same time, as if the building itself had agreed to be calm while my insides shook. My name is Helen. I am 71 years old. My hands are not as steady as they used to be, and my legs swell by late afternoon. My eyes still catch sunlight in a way that surprises me. I raised my girl, Alina, on pot roast and piano lessons, and on the sound of my husband reading out loud. I worked 2 jobs when my husband was sick so she could stay in ballet and not know the prices on fruits by touch like I did. I did not raise her to measure life in dollars. But the whisper from that orderly rang in my ears like a spoon striking a glass in a room full of people who refused to look at me. I watched the closed door where my daughter stood with the doctor and tried to hear what they were saying. Words floated out in pieces. Palliative, options, coverage. The words did not match how lightheaded I had felt when I climbed the porch steps that morning, the way my breath snagged like a thread on a nail. I had come to the hospital because I could not catch air after a walk to the mailbox. They had run tests. A nurse had said kindly that a scan would give answers. It was not supposed to be a goodbye, not a dim room with a lamp turned off. It was supposed to be a fork in the road with 2 clear signs: treat or do not treat. And my own daughter, my Alina, was in there trying to nail the do not sign into the dirt while I sat 10 feet away, clutching a blanket like it was a plan. Age teaches you to go still. People think power is loud, but age knows power can be quiet. When you go silent, you can hear everything. I heard the orderly's breath. I heard the clatter of a dropped pen. I heard my heart stumble, then find itself again. I listened to the word palliative bounce and break, and I let my mind walk backward through a path I already knew too well. Paperwork, signatures, a decade-old afternoon when I put a pen in my daughter's hand, trusting her with my life. When I fell 10 years ago, tripped on the rug edge while carrying laundry, I hit the floor hard enough to scare myself. My left hip shouted for a week. That day, Alina came over with soup and a packet of forms. She was practical, efficient, and a little bossy in a way that felt like love at the time. "Just in case," she said, kissing my cheek as if she were giving me a medal. "I want to make sure I can help if something happens." You know how hospitals can be? I signed those papers in my own kitchen, the smell of onions and butter in the air, my husband's tool bag sitting open on the chair because he had been fixing the door hinge again. The title on the top said, "Medical Power of Attorney." We took a picture after I signed, both of us smiling. I put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon, a little joke because of the tree in the yard. Back then, I saw it as love. Now, as I sat in a hospital hallway with a blanket over my knees and that whisper settling on my shoulders like dust, I saw it as leverage. The door opened. The doctor who stepped out was kind-eyed and young, the sort of man who still believed in explanations and second chances. He wore a badge clipped to his pocket that kept flipping upside down when he walked. He stopped in front of me and crouched a little so his face was on my level. "We're ordering a CT," he said. "We want to see if there's a clot or any other reason for your shortness of breath. We'll get answers today. If your mother is agreeable," he added, turning to my daughter, "we'll proceed." "Of course," I said. I felt the steadiness of my own voice like a fence post driven deep. I looked at Alina. She held my purse like it was a heavy book she did not want to read. Her mouth had that tight smile of someone playing a part. "Whatever is best, Mom," she said, but her voice had something in it that did not belong to care. It had calculation, the thin kind you put behind a soft word. "Actually," I said, "before anything else, I'd like to speak to the patient advocate." Alina's eyes flicked to me, a quick flash of confusion that turned to annoyance. "Why?" "There's no need to complicate now," I said to the nurse at the desk, and I made the word carry weight. Age took away my sprinting, but it gave me a tone I had never used when I was young. That tone did not ask, it arranged the world. They brought a woman with a clipboard and clear eyes. Her hair was pulled back into a bun that looked practical instead of hard. She introduced herself as Marissa and led us into a small room that smelled like paper and coffee. There was a jar with 3 pens in it. There were neat stacks of forms like white bricks. I asked for the form to revoke the medical power of attorney effective immediately. My voice did not tremble. My hands did not either when I wrote my name, though my lungs were a little angry about being asked to breathe deeper while I leaned over the desk. I appointed my neighbor Carol as temporary proxy. Carol is the sort of woman who appears with a casserole and a pen. She knows the plumber's names and keeps spare batteries in a drawer labeled with masking tape. I knew she would answer the phone if a nurse called. I signed. I asked that my chart be clearly marked full treatment, unless I said otherwise, and that no information be shared with any person without my approval, name by name. I spoke slowly, and I watched Marissa's eyes move in a way that meant she was not only listening, but believing. Alina's mouth opened and closed. "Mom, not now, baby," I said. The endearment slipped out from an old room in me. I wanted to touch her hair, like when she was 5 and came to my bed after a nightmare. I wanted to say it was all a mistake, but the orderly's whisper sat between us like a third person, looking at us both. The CT room was cold and humming. The machine made a sound like a slow washboard. When they slid me in, I stared up at the white ring and thought of the lemon tree in my yard, how in winter I threw a blanket over it like a child. The technician asked me to hold my breath. I held it and imagined the exact shape of the corner in my kitchen where the wall paint never quite matched after we patched it. I imagined my husband's laugh, which had a small cough in it the last 2 years of his life and never lost its warmth. I imagined Alina at 11, playing a piano piece too fast, tripping over the keys, then starting again. These thoughts floated through me like good birds. When the test was over, I felt more human than I had in the hallway. They found what the doctor had suspected, a small clot in my lung, a treatable problem, blood thinners, oxygen. Observation, it was fixable. It was not a death sentence. I felt gratitude run through me like warm tea. Then I felt something else, old and quiet, the kind that does not shout, it just decides. They thought I was weak. I was about to become very expensive. I planned to change our family forever. They won't believe what awaited them. But before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. They wheeled me to a room with a window that looked out at the parking lot. The curtains were clean. The bed made a soft beep when I pressed the buttons. I pretended to drift off when my daughter came in. I let my eyes go half shut. She checked her phone. She stood, then stepped out into the hallway. A second shadow joined hers behind the curtain, my son-in-law, Mark. Mark has a salesman's posture. He carries himself like the hallway belongs to him. He is the sort of man who calls a coffee shop by a nickname after 2 visits. He smiles in a way that looks like he is thinking about a number. I used to tell myself I was being uncharitable when I noticed these things. Now I listened. "Is it done?" he asked. "Not yet," Alina said. She asked for the advocate. Mark made a sound, half laugh, half sigh, the sound of someone who just learned his shortcut is closed. "We need to move faster," he said. "I told you the market is dropping. If we're going to list the house, we need access to her accounts now. Assisted living won't take her if—" "Don't say assisted living," Alina whispered. "She'll hear you." I did not breathe for a full count of 5. If I had, I might have sobbed, and it would have ruined the quiet clarity of that moment. My house. The place where my husband built bookcases with his careful hands, measuring twice and cutting once like a prayer. The lemon tree he babied through 2 winters, propping it with sticks when storms came. My kitchen with the scuffed drawer that sticks and the little plastic rooster on the windowsill, faded from the sun. They were speaking about it like an item on a spreadsheet under assets. I pressed the call button. The nurse arrived, her eyes alert. "Nurse," I said calmly, "would you mind getting hospital security?" My son-in-law is not my visitor. My voice was so polite that it surprised even me, like seeing your reflection smile in a way you did not know you could. They left after that. Alina crimson with embarrassment, Mark with his jaw set in a way that tried to look noble and only looked stubborn. He sent a text as he turned away. His face glowed blue and hard. I didn't read it. I did not need to. I knew that anger has its own words, and they were not for me. That night, while the ward quieted and the nurse tucked a warm blanket around my feet, I stared at the ceiling and decided I would not die while somebody planned my furniture. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Ellis. He is older than me by 5 years and twice as stubborn. He answers the phone like it owes him money. He has a voice that could argue with a wall and make it apologize for being there. "Helen," he said, "I told you to call me only when you needed me." "I need you," I said. "Today." By noon, we had drawn up 3 papers. He came to the hospital with his assistant and a briefcase that clicked shut like a promise. He wore a tie printed with tiny anchors. He pulled a small folding table up to my bed, and we set to work as if we were knitting a sweater that had to be ready by supper. The first paper was a new will. The second was a trust in my husband's name for my grandchildren's education. The third was a transfer on death deed for the house directly into that trust. We set a small stipend for Alina, enough to keep her safe, on one condition, written in plain words a judge could read without squinting. She could not share, funnel, or assign a cent to her husband, expressly and forever. If she divorced him, the condition vanished like fog in sun. It was written exactly like that, clear and simple. There were no trapdoors, no fancy language. "I feel wicked," I told Mr. Ellis, "for making conditions like that." He tapped his pen, considering. "Not wicked," he said. "Wise." The law is not here to bless harm. It is here to describe the truth in a way other people must recognize. Your truth is that you do not trust this man. That is not a sin. It is a judgment based on facts. He asked me to tell him things in detail he could put into notes in case we needed to answer questions later. So I did. I told him about the whisper in the hallway, word for word. I told him about the talk of listing my house before the scan results. I told him about the folder of forms Mark had brought me last spring about streamlining my accounts. I told him about the day Alina and I signed the old power of attorney at my kitchen table and how I had felt proud of being so responsible and how that pride had been turned against me. Mr. Ellis took notes in small, neat letters, his face calm and watchful. When he was done, he leaned back and nodded once. "This is clean," he said. "This will hold. We'll file the deed as soon as you're discharged. I will courier the trust documents to the bank and put the will on file. And you, Helen, are going to live long enough to make these men gnash their teeth when they see you at the grocery store." "That is not my goal," I said, and smiled a little. "But I will not cry if it happens." By late afternoon, with 4 lines humming by my bed, Mark arrived again. He carried flowers from the grocery store and a folder of helpful documents. His smile looked like it had been ironed. He kissed the air near my cheek, as if affection was something that could be kept at a safe distance and still count. "Just some standard forms," he said softly. "So, you can rest. We don't want you worrying about the mess of bills or anything. I've highlighted where to sign." I opened the folder. Durable power of attorney, financial, with his name at the top. A quitclaim deed for my house, a do not resuscitate order tucked inside a packet labeled comfort preferences, like it was about pillows and blankets. yellow highlight lines neat as classroom rulers. "I thought you cared about my rest," I said. I kept my voice sweet because it made me feel like I was in control of something very large. He nodded, eager. "Of course. That's all we want, for you to have peace." "Then rest your mouth," I said, "and hands off my papers." I turned to the nurse. "Please, call security." And then the hospital social worker, Mark, stepped back an inch. "There's no need to be dramatic." "You're right," I said. "Paperwork will do." The social worker came in, a woman with tired eyes that woke up when I spoke. I gave her a clear account, using the words she would recognize and write down: pressure, misrepresentation, interference with care. I repeated the orderly's whisper. I said the words, "I feel unsafe in medical decision-making with my son-in-law present." I watched something on her face harden into purpose. She wrote "boundary violated" in large letters on her notes and underlined it twice. She told me she would put an alert on my chart that any changes to my directives must be witnessed by hospital counsel. I signed that notice as well. When she left, I sent a text to Mr. Ellis. "It is time." They discharged me the next day. The nurse wheeled me downstairs, and the automatic doors opened with a soft sigh. Outside, the air smelled like rain. "Can you drive me home?" I asked Alina. My voice was plain. She nodded and walked to bring the car around, careful and quiet. I watched her hands on the wheel as we drove, the tendons thin and steady. They looked like they belonged to someone who made cupcakes for school fundraisers and kept spare Band-Aids in her purse. They did not look like the hands of someone who would say, "She won't last long," into a hallway. But both were true. That is the worst part of love, the way it must hold two opposite truths in the same heart. We pulled into my driveway. The lemon tree brushed the windshield softly like it was tapping out a question in green. The front steps needed paint. The lock stuck at the turn and then gave in with a small click. Inside, everything was where I had left it, except the light was different, as if the house had been waiting. "Come inside," I said. "We need to talk." I had baked that morning. Hospital food makes you crave butter like a memory. The blueberry scones had browned in the oven, while the oxygen machine wheezed softly in the living room after we set it up. I set out the good plates, the ones with small chips that tell you they have been used by people who were not afraid to enjoy their own dishes. I poured tea into the cups my mother left me, the ones with thin handles that make my fingers look clumsy now. Then I placed the folder on the table, my folder, not Mark's, the trust, the will, the deed, a letter in my handwriting, folded once. "Mark said," Alina started. "I do not care what Mark said," I interrupted. My voice didn't rise. It rooted itself into the kitchen floor. "I heard what you said to the doctor." Her face fell like a small building losing its scaffolding. She sat down hard and pressed her lips together to stop them from shaking. Mom, we are drowning. The debt, the mortgage, his job might cut his bonus, and our car needs a new transmission. And so your solution," I said gently but firm, "was to cut my life." She cried then, quick tears that came with shame and excuses. She pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth. I was not thinking clearly. I thought, if this was the end anyway, then saving the money for the kids made sense. He kept saying we had to be practical. "We will be practical," I said. "Practical people eat. They sleep. They do not gamble their mother's breath on a budget plan." I pushed the folder toward her. "This is what practical looks like," I said. "This is my confession too, Alina. I should never have given you power without teaching you the weight of it. I should never have given you money without giving you a backbone to say no when someone tried to take it. I am correcting both today." She wiped her cheeks and opened the folder. The papers were arranged with tabs in simple words: the trust, the will, the deed, the letter. Her eyes flicked from line to line and then stopped when she understood the condition. "You are cutting me off," she whispered. "I am protecting the part of you that still knows right from wrong," I said. "You are my daughter. But you married a man who measures love in checking accounts. He tried to make my death a math problem. So here's the equation he cannot solve." I told her exactly what would happen. I told her the house would pass to her children upon my death, locked in a trust that only funded their education and basic needs until they were old enough to stand on their own. I told her she would receive a monthly stipend for her own needs, modest but reliable, unless she tried to route any of it to Mark. If she stayed with him, that money would be locked. If she left him, the lock would open. There would be no side doors, no loans, no temporary transfers. Every attempt would trigger a notice to the trustee, and the trustee knew how to say no. She pressed her hands against the edge of the table as if bracing for a wave. "He will be furious," she said. "He can be hungry too," I said flatly. "He will not eat my home." There is a kind of quiet that follows a line that has been drawn. We sat in that quiet. The kitchen clock ticked, the oven cooled with small clicks. Outside, the lemon tree moved, making the light change on the wall. In that quiet, I watched my daughter fight with herself. I could see the girl I had braided for first grade. I could also see the woman who had learned to hide behind a man's voice. "Mark will say you are being manipulated," she whispered. "I am being liberated," I said, "by the truth. And by the law." I held up another paper with a calm hand. "There is also a restraining order drafted for him. He will not step on my porch without a sheriff at his elbow. If he calls the doctor again, the hospital will report it. If he tries a signature trick, we will let a judge taste it." She looked at me then like I was brand new. Maybe I was. Age can make you small. It can also crown you. I had been careful and soft for many years, as if softness was the only proof of love. Now I understood that softness without a firm hand becomes a trap. "Mom," she said, and the word was the old one, the one that had weight. "I am sorry." "Then show me," I said. "Leave him. Or at least leave his plans." She nodded once, then shook her head, and then stared at her own hands, like they might decide for her. She took the letter from the folder and unfolded it. I had written it that morning, my breath steady between sentences. In it, I told her everything I did not want to say out loud in that kitchen. I told her about the day I caught her in the bathroom at 12, slicing at her hair with scissors because a girl had called it mousy, and how I had held the good comb and said, "We do not attack ourselves because someone else is cruel." I told her about loaning her money for her first apartment and walking around the block twice afterward because I was afraid I had taught her that solving problems with money would make them smaller when sometimes it makes them bold. I told her that I loved her more than I loved my house, but I also loved decency more than I loved being liked. I told her that when I die, I want to die of something honest, not of somebody else's plan. She finished the letter and pressed it to her chest. She did not thank me. She did not apologize again. She sat very still, and her breathing evened out, and for a moment I saw a small path open in front of her, like a well-swept floor. 3 nights later, Mark hosted what he called a family meeting to clarify misunderstandings. He sent a message with a tone like a memo. He invited my grandchildren, who are 12 and 8. He invited me, which was brave in the way people think inviting a witness to a show is brave. I arrived early with Mr. Ellis. My grandchildren whispered in the hallway like kittens. Alina stood in the kitchen, turning a glass in circles on the counter, making little rings of water appear and disappear. She looked at me, then at the doorway. He thought this was a meeting. I came to close a case. He brought charts. I brought the truth. Only one survives this table. When Mark strode in, he carried a binder like a priest with a bad gospel. He wore a suit that was a little too sharp for a living room. He put the binder on the table and spread his hands like a man introducing a new product. "Let us all calm down," he began. "There has been a lot of emotion, and that is understandable. But emotions do not pay bills. We need to focus on what is best for the family." I did not let him speak longer. I slid my phone onto the table and pressed play. It was his voice recorded outside my hospital room door. If we're going to list the house, we need access to her accounts now. Then that ugly line that had lodged in me like a bone. She won't last long. He blanched. His color left him like someone had opened a window and let it out. He reached for anger, but it slipped. He tried to laugh, but it clanged. "This is out of context," he said finally. "It is the whole context," I said, "and here is the rest." I turned to my grandchildren. They stood in the doorway, solemn and curious. The older one clutched the banister like it was a question. The younger one looked at my hands. I kept my voice simple. "This house you love," I said. "The lemon tree. The little room with the quilts. The porch where we count the birds. I am making sure it will not be a sales item for anyone who does not love it. Someday it will be yours if your mother chooses to do right, not your stepfather's. He may vanish today or later, but he will vanish from it." Mark's eyes went hard. "You cannot do this," he said to me. "You cannot bar me from financial decisions that affect my family." "I can," I said. "And I have." I put the restraining order paperwork on the table like a placemat. "I filed this today. You will be served this week. Until then, you will keep your distance. If you step on my porch, I will call 911. If you call my doctor, he will document it. If you try to walk my daughter into a bank for a signature, a teller will watch you while you walk right back out." He opened his binder. The pages were full of charts. He tried to sound reasonable. He said words like portfolio and asset protection and liability, as if this language could turn a heart into a ledger. He said my sentimentality was clouding long-term planning. I did not argue with his spreadsheets. I poured tea. I offered scones to the children, who took them carefully and ate slowly, their eyes on me. I opened my folder and laid out the simple papers Mr. Ellis had prepared. I read aloud the parts that mattered. I read slowly, so the words could settle. Mark left with a slammed door and a promise to fight this. He said the word lawyer like it was supposed to make me flinch. I did not. I had one, and he had a soul that could not be defended by neat suits forever. The restraining order hearing came a week later. It was quick because the facts were clean. The judge was a woman with hair pulled back and a face that did not like theater. Mr. Ellis spoke calmly. He said the words undue influence and attempted misrepresentation. He presented the recording, the notes from the hospital social worker, and a letter from the patient advocate describing my revocation of power of attorney and the details of the alert on my chart. Alina spoke, voice shaking but clear, and told the truth without drama. She said she had made an error in judgment under pressure from her husband. She said she had tried to stop, then had not. She said she was stopping now. Mark tried to bluster, he tried to shame, he tried to make it all sound like a family miscommunication. The judge held up one hand and told him to sit still. She issued the order in a voice that could cut rope. He was barred from my property, from my medical contacts, from any attempt to speak for me in any setting. She signed the order and slid it toward me. The pen felt heavy and good in my hand when I countersigned. After the hearing, in the hallway, Mark leaned in just enough to make me aware of his breath. "You think you've won," he said quietly. "But money runs out. Health runs out. Then what? You cannot stop the future." I smiled at him with my teeth in it. "I cannot stop the future," I said, "but I can stop you from stealing it." He flinched as if the words had weight. He stepped back. He looked smaller than he had in my kitchen with his binder. It is interesting how a courthouse can do that to a man who did not understand that not all rooms are sales floors. Life after that settled into a rhythm that felt like a good coat, worn in, solid, protective. My lungs behaved with the help of the pills. The oxygen machine hummed at night like a small river. The lemon tree pushed out new leaves. I took to sitting on the porch in the mornings with a blanket over my knees and a notebook. I wrote letters, one to each grandchild for the years they will grow through. 16, 18, 21. The letters are simple, like the life I want them to live. They say things like, "Do not trust someone who gets mean when they are afraid," and "If you have $50, keep 10 for a rainy day," and "It is brave to leave a table where love is not served, even if your chair is pretty. I wrote a letter to my husband too, though I do not know where to send it. I told him about the judge. I told him about the scones. I told him that his bookcases are still holding everything they should, the shelves still steady where his hands were. I told him that the lemon tree he babied finally dropped a fruit into my hand while I was not looking, and that it felt like a little yellow sun. Alina came over often. At first, she came with shoulders high, like she expected to be scolded by some invisible voice. She would ask if I needed anything and then sit at the edge of the chair. Her phone would light up and then stay dark. Eventually, the phone stayed in her bag. We did not talk about Mark at first. We talked about the garden. We talked about the old neighbor, Mr. Castillo, who still waved when he carried his trash cans to the curb. We talked about church and whether the new organist was too enthusiastic with his pedals. We talked about the weather, the clouds, the laundry, the little things that stitch a day together. We let the bigger things sit in the corner like a suitcase waiting for its owner. One afternoon, she opened her mouth and the big thing came out without drama. I told him to leave, she said. I told him to pack a bag. He called me names I will not repeat. I did not hug her right away. I am not a saint. But I made tea, I warmed scones, I listened. I told her that love without boundaries turns into a trap. I told her that I had set a boundary that would hold us both. She cried a little and then she laughed at herself for crying. We cleaned the cups in the sink, her washing, me drying, the way we had done when she was 10 and tall enough to reach the dish rack. A week later, the children came over with their backpacks. They ran to the lemon tree first, as always, then asked if we could make lemonade. We did. We used too much sugar the first glass and less in the second. The younger one said it tasted like a good face. I began to sleep without waking at 3 a.m. to stare at the ceiling. I put fresh sheets on the guest bed. I wrote down the numbers for the trust in a small book and left it in the safe deposit box, along with a letter to the future trustee, which says in plain words, "Do not let anyone talk you into forgetting what this is for." Mr. Ellis helped me choose a trustee who has a calm jaw and no interest in pleasantries. When I met her, she brought her own pen and a notebook with tabs she made herself. We shook hands like people who know a task and mean to complete it. The hospital mailed me a summary of care, a little stack of papers that say, in their careful way, "You are still here." The first time I held the summary, I thought of the hallway and the whisper. I thought of how fear had moved from the inside of me to the outside. I realized that the most frightening thing had not been the possibility of a clot or even the word palliative. It had been the sound of my daughter's love being held hostage by someone else's hunger. Mark tried once more, months later, to send a letter through a mutual friend. In it, he wrote about forgiveness as if it were an instrument you hand to a man who wants to conduct your life. He wrote about misunderstandings. He wrote about all the good he had done for the family. He wrote about strategy as if I had a strategy other than breathing and seeing my grandchildren climb into the big armchair with a book. I sent it back with no note. This, too, is a boundary. You do not have to answer every knock on your own door. Some knocks are for the wind. Sometimes in the late afternoons, Alina and I sit and sort old photos. We hold up a picture of her in a yellow dress stained with watermelon, grinning at the camera like the world was a bowl of fruit. We hold up a picture of my husband in the backyard with the lemon tree, small and embarrassed, in the corner, a stick with ideas. We hold up a picture of me at 23, my hair thick and my eyes serious, as if I already knew the weight that would come and still wanted it. We put these pictures in albums and slip notes between the pages in case anyone needs help understanding later. The notes are simple. They state who, when, and why. I do not trust memory to be kind without a little help. There is a thing that happens inside me when I hear the word money now. I feel two parts of myself look at each other. One part remembers the nights I counted out dollars at the kitchen table and made a grocery list that fit the math. The other part remembers the hallway and the whisper and the word waste. I have decided that the only waste I will accept now is letting my lemon tree drop fruit without anyone noticing. Everything else, I will notice. I must tell you something I wish I did not have to. I have spent years being agreeable because I thought it was a gift I was giving my family. It was a gift sometimes. It was also a doorway. The wrong person will always prefer an open door to a locked one, and I had left too many doors open. because I thought that meant love could come and go. Love should come and go freely, yes. But there are other things that slip in while you are not looking. This is my semi-confession. I believed too long that love meant saying yes. I am old enough now to know that sometimes love is a clean no. I was visiting the hospital cafeteria months after everything when I saw the orderly who had whispered to me on the first day. He was buying a coffee. I went up to him and thanked him. He looked embarrassed and pleased, like he had not expected the world to lean back toward him with gratitude. "I did not want to overstep," he said. "I just thought you should know." "You did not overstep," I said. "You stepped exactly where you should." He smiled. "I saw your daughter here last week," he said. "She was with you, buying a sandwich. She looked different." "She is different," I said. "She is breathing." When I returned to my chair, I found myself looking at people in a new way. The old man stirring sugar into tea as if stirring would give him more time. The young nurse who checked her phone for a picture and smiled in a way that softened her whole face. The woman at the window, arms folded tight, waiting for news that would either open her life or close it. We are all standing in hallways we did not choose sometimes. We all hope to hear the right thing through the door. There is a lesson here. It is small. It is not loud. It is the sort of lesson an old woman can hold in her hands. The lesson is this: do not give away the keys to your own house and call it kindness. Keep one key for yourself, always. Keep another for someone who loves you without wanting to own you. Put both keys where you can find them when you are afraid. I keep baking. Scones mostly because they are easy and forgiving. I like the way the dough gives under my palms. I like the way butter pieces melt into little pockets. I like the sound of the oven door closing, a soft, certain sound. The children eat them with jam and tell me school stories that are both too small and too big for the world, like a boy with a loud laugh who said a kind thing and does not know he is kind yet, or a teacher who wore a dress that made everyone feel tidy just looking at it. Sometimes the house is quiet, and I stand in the living room and touch the bookcases my husband built. The wood is smooth and warm. I think of his hands measuring and sanding and lifting. I think of his small cough, which was the sound of love and not of sickness in the end. I think of how he would have stood in that kitchen with Mark and used fewer words than I did, and how he would have been content to let me use the many words I needed. He was good that way. He knew that some battles you fight with silence and others with a list of things that must be done now. I keep a copy of the trust papers on the top shelf in the hall closet where the winter blankets live. It makes sense to me that the future should be folded near warmth. Sometimes I take them down and read them like a poem. They are not beautiful words, but they are honest. They say, "This is for you, children, so you do not have to lose your mother's breath to own a roof." They say, "This is for you, daughter, so you know that love can be firm and still love." They say, "This is for you, Helen, so you can sleep." People ask me now and then if I have forgiven Mark. The question always comes like someone asking if I have tried a new brand of jam, as if forgiveness were a product. I say that I have no interest in his soul. That is his job to tend. My job is my house, my papers, my lemon tree, my daughter's spine, my grandchildren's mornings, my own sleep. I tell them I have forgiven myself for waiting too long to draw a line. That forgiveness matters. It keeps my hands from shaking when I have to sign a thing with weight. I went back to the hospital for a checkup last month. My doctor looked older, which means I must look older too. He listened to my chest and said the clot had not returned. He said the medicine was doing what it should. He asked me how I was doing, and I told him I was living with purpose. He laughed softly and said that was the best medicine. He meant it as a kind thing to say. I took it as a measured truth. On my way out, I passed the hallway where I had first sat with the blanket and the clicking chair. For a second, the walls leaned in again and the sound of that whispered sentence came back, thin and sharp. I stood there, and I let it pass through me like a draft. I could accept it now without letting it set up a home in me. I had my own home. If there is a legacy in all this, it is not the trust or the deed. It is not even the lemon tree, though that tree will outlast my hands. My legacy is a line on a table in a kitchen, drawn clean with words and signed with hands that were not shaking. That line says, "You may step over if you choose decency. If you choose harm, you will not." I hope, when I am gone someday, far from now, that my granddaughter will be the one who stands in a hallway with someone's fear in her mouth and says, "Treat her. She's ours. She lasts as long as she can fight." I hope my grandson will be the one who checks the papers and says, "Everything is in order," and means more than money. I hope my daughter will sit in a chair at a table that is hers and know that her mother did not choose a house over her, but chose a way for her to find herself again. And I hope that if you are reading this and you are in a hallway of your own, that you will ask for the advocate, that you will call the lawyer, that you will say no with the gentlest voice you can manage, that you will save the yes for the people who understand that your breath is not a line item on any plan. The orderly's whisper has faded now like a stain that finally rinsed out. Another voice takes its place, my own, steady and awake. I will be afraid again, because fear does not vanish. It just changes shape. I am no longer afraid of hospitals or tests. I am afraid of what money does to people who think it is the same thing as a future. But I'm not afraid of him. Not anymore. I sit with my tea, watching light move through the room. The lemon tree shifts in a small wind. The house is quiet except for the hum of something that keeps me alive while I sleep. It is enough. It is everything. And if anyone whispers in a hallway again, I hope it is the sound of my family saying the one sentence I waited too long to learn how to say, "No, this life is not for sale." Do you think that the trust and restraining order were the right moves, or were they too harsh? Share your opinions and life experience in the comments.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.